Week 4 of the fantasy baseball season. Here's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for this week. The first hitter, Trey Turner of the Philadelphia Phillies. Trey Turner off to a slow start, as well as this offense as a whole for Philadelphia. On the year, 1 homer, 6 RBIs, 12 runs scored, a stolen base, a 252 average, and a 286 on base percentage. So Turner off to a slow start. Stolen bases are down for him as well, where he's not getting on base as much, where his on base percentage isn't even 300. And last season was a big year for him, hitting 304 with 15 homers, 69 RBIs, and 36 stolen bases. So like I said, Philadelphia as a whole, this team, they're rough right now in the early going. But Trey Turner, we know he's a guy that could be a 20-30 guy, especially in that bandbox over there in Philadelphia. And right now, well, he's off to a slow start, someone I would target and try to make a deal for. April 11th versus Arizona, 0-4. April 12th versus Arizona, 2-4, a homer, 2 RBIs. April 13th versus the Cubs, 1-4 with a run. And in tonight's game, he went 1-4 with an RBI in that one versus the Cubs, where they lost 10-4. Was Philadelphia. So right now, well, Trey Turner, he's struggling. Not much going for him right now. Like I said, if he's not getting stolen bases, and if the average is down, that definitely takes a lot out of his fantasy value as Trey Turner. But he's a professional hitter, and he's got good hitters behind him, where Bryce Harper's off to a slow start in the early going. Schwarber, we know he's not going to be a batting average guy, but he has his 6 home runs in the beginning of the season. So they need other guys like Alec Bohm to step up, Justin Crawford possibly to step up as well, and Adolis Garcia to keep things going, where he's been hitting well over the last couple games. So right now, Trey Turner definitely struggling in the early going, but we know what he's capable of, and he's been a great fantasy player over the last few seasons. Next hitter I look to buy is Salvador Perez of the Kansas City Royals. Sally Perez, he's off to a slow start in the early going in Salvador Perez, but still qualifying at catcher and first, playing part-time at catcher time. On the year, 2 home runs, 2 RBIs, 4 runs scored, a 153 average, and a 219 on base. So we know Salvador Perez, he's not going to be a high batting average guy, obviously, but still 30 and 100 last season, once again, with a 236 average. He's got pop. They moved the fences in over there in Kansas City, but early on, the weather hasn't been great as well, where some of these hits, it takes him to May or even June sometimes to really get things going. The last few games for Perez, April 10th versus the White Sox, 1-3. April 11th versus the White Sox, 1-4. April 12th, 0-4 versus the White Sox. Tonight at the Tigers, he went 1-4 in that game, so he's struggling mightily as Salvador Perez. But like I said, he's a guy that's just going to bring you power, and still with the catching eligibility, obviously it's a big thing. So right now, well, he's struggling, and we know he's at the latter part of his career as Salvador Perez, even though he hasn't slowed down at all over the last few seasons. He's definitely a player that will go out there and buy this week. Next hitter, Pete Crow Armstrong of the Chicago Cubs. So PCA, in his first full season last year, he was in the 30-30 club, 31 homers, 95 RBIs, 35 stolen bases, a 247 average. But so far this season, very slow start for PCA. 1 home run, 5 RBIs, 11 runs scored, 4 stolen bases, a 215 average, and a 269 on base percentage for PCA. So last season, towards the second half a little bit, teams were catching up. The breaking ball, he definitely has a problem with this PCA, and he's a guy that chases a lot. He did have 155 strikeouts last season in 591 at-bats. And also as well with PCA, his on-base to batting average last season wasn't great, only 40 points higher. It was last season, a 287 on base and a 247 batting average. So he's a free swinger, is PCA. Like I said, he's chasing a lot at those pitches, but he's still a guy, when it's all said and done, I think he's going to bring a lot to fantasy owners. And I know also as well the Cubs are moving him down the lineup, but the last couple games, he's starting to get it going a little bit. April 11th versus the Pirates, 1-4. April 12th versus the Pirates, 0-4. April 13th at the Phillies, 1-5, a run and an RBI. And in tonight's game, he did go 2-4 at Philadelphia with 2 runs in that one, batting 8. So like I said, he's been moved down in the lineup, is PCA, over the last few games, just to get him going, take some pressure off of him. But like I said, in the early going, especially in these colder cities, these hitters are going to get off to slow starts. And obviously in Chicago, it's been cold so far in the early going, but now the weather's starting to turn a little bit in some of these cities on the East Coast. And I think PCA, if they're coming off a 2-4 game here tonight, get things going, and right now will be the time to buy him before it gets on a hot streak. And then obviously his value would be peak value once again. Next hitter, Rafael Devers of the San Francisco Giants. So Devers, he hasn't been 100% so far all season long, where he had a hamstring injury, and he just started playing first base in the last week for the San Francisco Giant team. And on the year, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, 6 runs scored, a 211 batting average, and a 252 on-base percentage. So last season, half a season he was over there in San Francisco. Still a monster year was for Devers, 35 and 109. But like I said, he's not 100% with the hamstring. And now he's back at first base for this San Francisco Giant team. And he does have the matchup that just started here tonight at Cincinnati, where I think he could get things going with 2 more games this week there. And then they travel to Washington, is this San Francisco Giant team. April 10th, the O's 1 for 5. April 11th at the O's 1 for 4, 2 runs scored. April 12th, the O's 1 for 4. And tonight's ball game at the Reds, he went 0 for 3. So it's been a long road trip. It's going to end up being a 9-game trip for the San Francisco Giant team. We're obviously playing on the East Coast, thrown off from the time a little bit. Also, the weather not that great, even though it's no excuse for these ball players. But like I said, just going off his track record and statistics, a lot of players who play on the East Coast early in the season, pitchers obviously have the advantage where it's tougher to hit the baseball in colder weather, especially in some of these night games where the winds are hurling and your hands numb up pretty quick. But Rafael Devers, we know 30 and 100 pretty much every season. He's going to bring fantasy owners. And right now, while he's off to a slow start, the first 3 weeks, still in the month of the season, he's definitely a hitter. I would buy low this week. In the final hitter, Austin Riley of the Atlanta Braves. So Austin Riley, he's struggling mightily as well in the early going. No home runs on the year, 8 RBIs, 9 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 216 batting average, and a 316 on base percentage. So the only thing I'll give Riley is on base percentage is pretty good. He's starting to drive in some runs a little bit the last 2 out of 3 games, but as well, he's struggling. He's Austin Riley. He's in a big part of the order, obviously batting cleanup for this Brave team. April 11th versus the Guardians, 0 for 3. April 12th versus the Guardians, 2 for 5, a run, 2 RBIs. April 13th versus the Marlins, 1 for 5, a run, 2 RBIs, a stolen base. And in tonight's game versus the Marlins, he went 0 for 4 in that one. So this Brave team have playing pretty decent so far in the early going, especially with a makeshift pitching staff to start the season. And Austin Riley, we know pretty much every year, he's a guy that's going to pop 25, 30 home runs and drive in anywhere from 85 to 100 runs. Even though last season the season was cut short a little bit for him and he struggled, and it was obviously as well for the Atlanta Braves, a lost season with all the injuries. But like I said, Austin Riley is still a player that I still think has great years ahead of him, not realistically even in his prime. And he's in the lineup with a lot of great hitters, obviously. Ronald Acuna, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, Drake Baldwin. He's off to a great start this season. Michael Harris, when he could get things going as well. So I don't think Riley is going to be struggling for much longer. And like I said, he's a professional hitter and just off to a slow start and a perfect player to buy this week. So that's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for week 4 of the fantasy baseball season.